Ford is actually having to close down some plants, and they're struggling because of a supply chain issue that's challenging the sale of some of their cars. Now, we know Ford's struggled for quite some time now. Since the release of the new Ford Mustang Mach-E as well as the F-150 Lightning, they've had to incentivize those electrified vehicles, and Ford's been struggling on their heels trying to sell a lot of these vehicles. Incentives means you can get a deal, I can get a deal, but ultimately we're about in the midst of another major hurdle. And Ford's not the only one. Nissan's going through struggles, so is Stellantis. But Ford's latest issue is with the rare earth magnets. About 90% of the supply actually comes from China. And you ask, well, what's rare earth magnets? Well, it's something that goes in your laptop, in your cell phones. But no, it actually goes in other parts of your car. Steering components, audio systems, capacitors, a lot of electronics actually are utilized. It doesn't go exclusively into the use of EVs, that actually in regular vehicles. As a matter of fact, they've looked at having to temporarily close a plant that manufactures their Ford Exploders, or they're having to stop and halt temporarily the production. Now, the big impact isn't necessarily for Ford, and Ford's screaming that they need to get their supply chain in order. They need to support from, both the international markets, China. They need to look at their own backyard as well for localized manufacturing and supply, but as well administration here in the US. They're looking for support from every corner of the globe, but Ford's had to close their doors. The big risk is not so much for Ford, because Ford somehow just makes it on. If they don't sell that car, they'll sell something else. But we know they've struggled with some of their EVs, and you can get a deal there, but you can also get a deal with brands like Nissan. Have you heard the latest from Nissan? Yes, initially there was 9,000 employees kicked out, then 11,000, then they had to close some plants, and then recently, about a month ago, they actually had to look at shutting down one of their core plants in Japan. Things are getting desperate, but that's all on the heels of the change of the CEO. The CEO, the CFO were both swapped out. But unfortunately, there are other problems, because recently, hot off the press, just around the corner, they said they had to start closing more plants. And even now we're looking at another 2,000 to 3,000 workers potentially losing their jobs because these plants that are manufacturing some of the Infiniti, the QX products, as well as the Mercedes GLB is also manufactured at some of those plants. And all for the sake of trying to stay afloat. Now, we know Nissan struggled with a lot of their sales. They haven't been able to move a lot of their inventory, and the ones that they have moved were done through massive incentives. I know a lot of you have said, I've commented about this before, and you've said, I see Nissans all over. I see Rogues everywhere. Yes, all over in the fleets, they're being purchased and scooped up, but that's because they're heavily incentivized. You see, they're not making a lot of profit. Suffice it to say, the dealers are moving metal, but they're not making the profits because they're having to incentivize. I've even seen a local Nissan dealer as well incentivizing with low interest rates on their used inventory because they're just trying to move products. They're not getting people in the door. So people don't normally gravitate to Nissan with the quality control issues. They've certainly had issues with the CVT, and even though Jatco's made some changes and alterations, their latest transmission is much better. There still are some problems. Unfortunately, the variable compression motor, another big issue that we've heard of lately, where now they're having blown engines. So Nissan can't get a break, and they're having to close even more plants. This is devastating for the brand, and on top of it, for buyers that are buying some of those products, that leaves them scratching. What do I do with my car if I need it serviced? Where do I get parts? If these dealership networks are closing, what am I gonna do? Well, currently they're not closing as of yet, but the way things are ticking, it's a cascading effect that it looks like Nissan is seriously in hot water. If you're liking the video so far, you're gonna love the rest of the channel. Be sure to hit that subscribe button down below, and don't forget the notifications bell so you know when the next amazing videos come. On top of the Stellantis, led by Carlos Tavares, who's now been pushed out the door, and we have a new CEO, we know that brand has struggled. Now, Stellantis is the owner of a multitude, over a dozen different brands like Alfa Romeo, Jeep, Dodge, Ram, Chrysler, and Maseratis. We know some of those products have not been selling. But unfortunately for Stellantis, they've been now considering rationing a lot of their product line. We know a lot of the full-size trucks and the Ram loyalists wanted more power under the helm of Carlos. What they ended up having was this electrified future in mind, and they were trying to transition everything into electric or plug-in hybrid. Even the Jeeps, for example, Wranglers, they were planning on bringing out a Recon. It was pure electric. Leaves a lot of people asking the question, where are you going to plug in your Jeep when you're doing the back 40 in the woods climb? Where are you going to plug it into? A tree? It's absolutely hilarious, but the unfortunate part is Stellantis has had some struggles with a lot of their key brands. They've had to consider maybe shedding some of their inventory, shedding some of their product line, but now even Ram and Kuniskis, of course, Tim is looking now, coming back into the fold, looking at how we can turn this train around. Till then, there's been nothing but layoff upon layoff upon layoff, some short-term, some temporary, and many permanent. We know the transition to electrification meant they dropped trucks that were popular. Some of the more affordable baseline work-type trucks from Ram, they pretty much shut those down in the forsaking of some of their top trim level vehicles as well, like the Tungsten 1500 Tungsten, which is their top trim level vehicle. And I've actually seen that truck in live, in person, and touched it, and it's a half-ton truck for $120,000. Where has this market gone, and is it no wonder people are not buying? Now, there's a promising future for all of these brands, but they've just got to get back down to the core essentials. What are the buyers looking for? Reliability and affordability. Bring those items back to the table and you've got some buyers. Mark my words, there's going to be some discounts rolling around as Stellantis, they look to try to promote some of their new products. They're looking at the whole idea of the Challenger Charger lineups with pure EVs and saying, you know what, that's not really working. We got to go back to brass tacks. They're promising looking at maybe even a low price point type sports car, maybe in that $15,000 to $20,000 range. They're also looking at bringing something that's more premium. I don't want to use the word Viper, but there's something along those lines. So even Stellantis is looking, you know what, we've got to correct our course. Things aren't working. But in the meantime, they're heavily incentivizing some of their products. Can you find deals? Absolutely. Are they openly advertised? Not always. Do you remember, dealers are their own worst enemy. See, the OEMs will set an MSRP, a sticker price, but it's the dealers that constantly add these market adjustment fees and put in these extras. And so that's almost out of the hands of the OEM itself. And actually, it's the dealers themselves are the ones that are going to play ball or not. So you've got to go shop around, look at whether you want a product from Ford, whether you want a product from Nissan or Stellantis. You've just got to know you've got to shop around. Most of those have multiple dealers. Many of them are desperate. Sales are down. We're seeing sales drop, and there is a huge opportunity for a win here. But ultimately, you can have the decision now whether you want to buy something or just wait it out. Anyway, again, as always, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I hope to see each and every one of you on the next one. You all have a wonderful day, everybody. Bye-bye.